start recording button. Make you look a little prettier in the shot. Yeah, I don't know. Facebook just won't take the stream this morning. So
yeah, it's an odd situation.
In our time number 2 weeks in a row of hitting just weird production problems. At least this didn't happen on our live show last night. But of the two shows that I'd want to go down, I don't want any of them to go down. But like at least this one can work in a not live format.
Well, yeah, it basically started out as a non-live podcast, and most of our listeners are listening at a later date. I mean, our live people.
Most of our watchers are at a later date too,
yeah.
Which has been the thing. But yeah, this is Rad Raptor Radio, episode 183. My name is Jeff.
I'm Tim.
And yeah, this is our weekly podcast in which we discuss pop culture news and such of the day, of the week, of the month, whatever,
of the year,
what have you. And then after that, we spend the back half talking about our favorite comic books that came out that week.
I love the fact, I think you've grown, Jeff, as you now set this up every time exactly how the podcast is going to be laid out.
I mean, the more you call it out, the less I'm going to do it in the future.
Oh,
I'm like one more you calling it out.
I called it out every week you've done it now. It's one of those things I used to do, and then you kind of jumped in and started doing it, and I feel kind of like a proud dad watching you go.
Yeah. But this, we're recording this on... this is the 24th day of June, also the day of the death of one, was it John McAfee, the antivirus guy?
Sure.
Have you ever tumbled down that rabbit hole?
Nope.
He died in a Spanish prison today. But you remember, like, McAfee...
Like this morning?
Yes. You remember, like, the antivirus software, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the guy who made like billions on that thing lived maybe the craziest life of anyone who's ever lived. Like, I am at this point just kind of wondering who they're going to cast in the movie. My money's on Nick Cage.
Well, I would say Nick Cage could do it once he's done with this like Truffle Pig movie or whatever.
Yes.
Is that Nick Cage?
Yes, that was Nick Cage. Because remember, it was like from Academy Award winner Nick Cage. That trailer you sent the other day cracked me up to no end.
It took itself very, very seriously.
For a movie about truffle pigs.
I heard it described as John Wick-esque, and I'm just intrigued now.
There's a lot of... Everyone's out there trying to make the next John Wick, which is really kind of funny.
Yeah, but how many of them are out to seek revenge because somebody stole their truffle pig?
Well, the whole... the one with the Better Call Saul guy in it, I forget his name right this second, was like the whole trailer. When you watch the movie, that's not the movie, but they pitched the whole trailer as like he's out to get revenge because they took his daughter's kitty cat bracelet. That's how they pitched the entire... Because they want people that like John Wick to watch these movies. So I'm guessing that there's more going on than just revenge for the truffle. But like, that's in the marketing. It's like, remember John Wick when it was all about a dog? This one's all about a kitty cat bracelet. Yeah, this one's all about a truffle pick. But no, John McAfee, however you say that guy. However you say that guy's name.
If you said McAfee, I would have known right away you were talking about.
He very possibly, very probably, allegedly killed his neighbor because his neighbor poisoned his dog. He also has
John Wick.
Several tweets in which he describes his attempts at relations with whales. There's also detailed accounts of some even less tame things that he's out there doing with women and other things. He's very random life. He's fled from country to country. Ran for president in 2016.
He apparently didn't win.
He did not win. He ran as a libertarian candidate, and for a large portion of the time was the front runner before Gary Johnson ended up becoming the libertarian candidate for president. But yeah, if you've ever wondered about the antivirus guy, tumble down the rabbit hole that is his crazy, crazy life existence and roller coaster, because it's It's nuts. He also said that he was very involved in Bitcoin and was out there claiming that if Bitcoin didn't hit like $1 billion by the year 2020, that he would eat his own little McAfee, which I'm assuming he didn't do. But maybe that's how he passed. I'm not really sure. It happened in prison, so.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Lived a rough life, that guy.
Yeah, it's rough when like like your life's so crazy that because like the go-to joke, the Jay Leno joke that you would say is like, oh, McAfee died, but it's probably still just running in the background. Ha 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 ha. Would be like the go-to joke, but the life's too crazy to even address it with that, and it's just this weird Tiger King-esque tale.
Talk show hosts, late night talk show hosts everywhere mourn not being able to use that joke, Jeff.
100%.
They're just all like, that was the joke.
But yeah, so that was my morning, was falling down that I didn't know any of that, and then I watched, I think, 2 or 3 different documentaries that
You've been up a long time this morning.
Yeah, that I was watching as I was getting up, drinking morning coffee, all that sort of stuff. It's kind of wild because every 3 years they would release another documentary of just like, woo, all right, we got updates. It's gotten even crazier. Culminating to, he was back in the U.S. and then fled for tax evasion and then got jailed for tax evasion and, got away ostensibly with like murder and other worse things, but died in a prison over tax evasion. So he was like 70-something years old. What a life.
I just gotta say, I still am kind of shocked at how early you get up. Like, I literally rolled out of bed, took about, 10 minutes, made some coffee, and then got in the car to head here. So, I watched nothing this morning.
Oh, I get up pretty early. Like...
I went to bed last night at 2:30. It sounds like I went to bed at the same time you woke up.
Yeah. No, I get up, usually it's like 5 or 6, somewhere in there, especially on the weeks when I have my children. I love my children. They're great. I need that like couple of hours to just kind of awaken to the day and like be able to like look at stuff, deal with stuff. Usually Andrew and I are talking work stuff that early too.
I always get the text messages when I get out of bed at 8. So.
Yeah. But yeah, it's...
I gotta catch up on all the bits. This is when you guys make all the important, and you're like, all right, let's vote on it. I'm not there, and the next thing I know, we're doing, like, let's pay all of our money to get Scotty Young to do an in-house signing. And I'm like, what did I just agree to while I was asleep? So.
Well, that's it. Yeah, everyone who's against it say so, and then you never say anything, so it's perfect.
Not that Scotty Young is going to be here. I was giving an example, so.
Yeah. Tim is historic in his dislike of Scotty Young, so.
Just his covers.
Did you ever read Middle West?
No.
Okay, so your ambivalence toward his writing and your dislike of his covers.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I ultimately, yes, I did not read Middle West, but as we always say on this show, it is impossible to read everything. My pull list this week this 5 Wednesday month has been the most insane 5 Wednesday month ever. And this particular week, all of a sudden, I started grabbing what I had just without starting new things, minus a couple DC titles. And most of those were even continuations of things I've read in the past. 38 books that were on my pull list this week. 38 books. That's insanity. That's why I don't read Middle West, man. I just don't have time.
Yeah. But it is
rough.
rough.
That's why I'm up till 2:30 in the morning, because I got home last night. I was like, I still have 34 books left ahead of me.
Well, it's rough. So I've put a lot of work in the last year or so into making sure that we're fighting less on this show, whether it's me and you or when it was me, you and Bobby or like whatever be it, and I think a big part of that sometimes, and it's like I'm guilty of it too, is like when someone else really likes something, making sure that you're like checking it out as well. But it's just, it gets unwieldy real
I,
fast.
I would say that becomes an impossibility. And although we say we do it, we ultimately don't do it. I mean, none of the three of us around here do. There are things that we check out if somebody speaks of it highly enough. But there are other things that, Andrew or I, or sometimes you, will rant and rave about for weeks and weeks and months on end. And every time we're like, have you got a chance to read that yet? And I'm like, nope. Because we have a comic book store, and again this week there were probably 60, 70 new books that we had in stock on New Comic Book Day, and sure, I had almost half of those books on my pull list, but that means there's still half of those books that I just can't, and it will take me a while to get through that. I probably won't have all 38 read before the next pull list comes out. I'll just work it through, and on weeks where I only have 20.
One, it's that thing too of like, and not to brag or complain. I meant complain, not to complain about the best job in the universe, but like, it is that thing of like, I used to be on the other side of the counter and I read comics because I liked and enjoyed comics, and now it's an aspect of my job, which inherently changes your relationship a little bit with it.
It's a fun aspect of the job, but at the same hand, there's definitely, and I try to do it because we have a number of customers, even on like this afternoon, will come in and they'll be like, hey, did you read this? Did you read this? Did you read this? And they expect a number of yeses from me along the way, I guess. And so, and we've got people who come in and ask questions about books all the time. And is this book series good? Is this book series good? So,
well, it's like, so I've been reading a lot more novels this year. It's like one of my things I wanted to do more of, because I used to do it a ton as a kid, and I've done less of it as I got older. And started reading A Tale of Two Cities this week, and it's the first time in my life I've read it not being assigned it, and I'm like, this book's really good. Like, it's that thing of just like every other, I had to read it in college, I had to read it in high school, and I was like, I didn't hate the book, but it was just like, of the things I was forced at gunpoint to read, it was pretty alright. And then when you're just actually reading it without that kind of pressure or something on you, it's like, oh, this is really good. I really enjoy this. And unfortunately, it builds up in a way when like one of us likes a book, when you're already under that, like, oh man, I gotta read stuff just so I'm ready for the show, just so I'm ready for the customers walking in here, because we want to be, because we have the best fans in all the comics, as I'm always saying. We want to be ready for them and prepared for them. And then when you add on that, your buddy going like, man, you gotta read this is the best thing. And you're like, I don't want to. Okay. It's just, you're already going in with kind of all of that notion that can kind of taint something if you're not really careful. So, but I'm trying to get, but that's why I'm doing a lot of Sunday reading. I tend to leave those comic books, especially if it's something you or Andrew are super into, for like a nice Sunday morning read. I didn't with Supergirl just because both of you were like so, and I was glad I didn't, because like that one I pushed up in the ranks. But like usually if I can let it there, I can get there with a clear mind and like be more excited about it and be like, oh, this is really, really, really cool thing. So I have like a whole stack of stuff that's like ways I pile of books that I feel like I'm letting the two of you down with. So
I mean, stacks of stuff are definitely happening, but it's part of the game. And you know what? We're not the only ones. I was talking with someone the other day, one of our customers, and they said, yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm going to go home and add it to the stack. I mean, and their stack was probably the same height that my stack is, of just stuff I've not yet got to, because again, this week had 38 books, and that happens sometimes. So,
well, the tough thing of like, so when I was doing like the whole other thing, there was stuff that I would read right away, and then there was stuff that I would let pile up, and then I would read through after it piled up, and then there was stuff that like, I'm always going to be a guy who's going to pile up Batman issues and detective issues, but I didn't. Tinian's detective run, I didn't really read until like maybe 6 months to a year after he was done on it, And I was like, well, I have all those because it's detective, and went back and read it. And I do that kind of stuff all the time. It's just you collect what you collect, and then, going back and reading a bunch of old Starlin stuff because I got piles of it, and that's part of the hobby is not always reading what came out this week. Sometimes it's, I'm like reading old stuff too and letting it pile up. And
it's an amazing trade if you get time to read old stuff. I got a stack of old stuff I'd like to read now, though. I'll probably be dead before I ever get time to do it.
It turns out, like when you become a divorced dude, you end up with a lot of time. It's really kind of because as a guy who lived the first kid when I was 20, so the first 12 years of my adult life, I would every single breath of free time was something that I fought for. It was oh my gosh, there's 7 minutes. I got to do something I like. Oh, I can watch 7 minutes of Bowfinger. That'll be great. And then now it's all right, drop the kids off. Don't have kids for a week or a significant other, or all right, I guess watch Bowfinger. I watched it 4 times yesterday, but might as well watch that again. Still great. Let's go for it. So yeah, your problem switches into how do I fill these hours? Yeah. And it's just to say, I'm sure I'll be out of this stage of life at some point too. But it's it is interesting how you kind of step in and out of these stages. It's given some thought of I'm sure there will come a time where it won't be like this again. But then kids are gonna grow up and graduate and move out of the house and be back in it. So I've given a lot of thought to okay, when I'm not in this stage next time, I really need to kind of prep and prepare for when that happens, because I've watched adults where their kids have moved out and then all of a sudden the floor collapses underneath them of just oh my gosh, what do I do with my time? Because it's a weird, it's a whole different world. And maybe McAfee, you fill it with all sorts of debauchery. Who knows?
I'll probably take a 5th or 6th job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Just 17 jobs. Why not? Yeah. I mean, you're getting weirdly. I mean, your youngest is just a little older than my youngest, but your older two are not on the verge of moving out. That's kind of crazy.
18, 15, and 8. So
yeah, that's. Are you is that what you're piling all the books up for? When I hit that stage, it's where I'm just going to read all this stuff?
No, I honestly always think tomorrow's going to be a better day and I'm going to have more time on my hands. It just doesn't.
And then you just keep taking more jobs.
And then I keep taking more jobs. There's always something else to do, I mean.
My favorite was the last job that you were looking at, and you were talking.
I turned down a job. It was arguably a top 5 most difficult things I've had to do, because
we sat talking about it for a while, and I have to imagine I rank probably higher than I should, but I can't imagine I rank that high into influential opinion in your life. But we even sat and talked about it for a long, whether it made sense or not. It's. In retrospect, I think you made the right call. I wasn't sure you did at the time.
I mean, it was a dream job, but at the same hand, you can't do everything, and ultimately it was both a. Is it going to ring again?
No, it rang once. And
I was it was both kind of a dream job, but ultimately it would not have paid enough to have offshot any of the other jobs I have.
So you wouldn't be able to unload the other job.
So it's not like I could have taken it and unloaded something else along the way. Mostly what I tend to build up is part-time jobs.
Because you are currently twice a pastor, a 2-time pastor. How do you call that if you're a pastor at 2 different churches?
No one does it.
Double pastor?
They just call it insanity.
Double pastor, work here.
College professor,
and sit on a board of a community theater.
Well, that's a volunteer thing. You always count that as jobs, but that's I also
has obligations.
I'm a head varsity basketball coach.
Head varsity basketball coach.
Yeah, but I mean, I think as adults we take on things in our life that we do just for the betterment of the world and those around us, and like sitting on boards and even coaching, it falls more into those categories than the work category.
Making the world better by coaching basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're making the life better for that group of boys that you coach.
Yeah.
So
I suppose that's true.
So yeah, I mean, I think you got kind of an idea of giving of yourself, giving of your time and everything else, to not just be a selfish person. And so I do a lot of volunteer things on top of all of the jobs.
Do you think
half my time here is volunteering? Like I said, I mean, we get paid for the hours we're in the store. But I mean, I read comics 6 nights a week for 2 hours or more. And so I mean I probably spend 12, or so that's on the low side. There are weeks I spend 20 hours just reading for the store.
Well, and that's what gets wild of like trying to figure out, and they have the same problem in video game stuff.
Yeah.
Of like, so if you work at like Kotaku or Polygon or IGN or any of these places, and you are paid for 40 hours of work a week where you're supposed to be writing articles and everything else, you're writing articles and writing reviews of games that you played.
Yeah.
And you're on podcasts where you're paid to be on the podcast, but you're coming to the podcast of like, hey, this is what I'm playing now. And it's that weird thing of like, any individual that gets attracted to that job would probably be playing those video games in some capacity, whether they were on that show or not. But you inherently change that relationship and that turns into work. So like, in all fairness, should those be paid hours? Probably, but all of them, I don't know. And it's
difficult. It's difficult to find where those lines get
gets
drawn.
really messy really fast. And like looking down the pipeline of like our stuff, and as we grow, and we would all dream that like this all pays us like a good full-time wage eventually, so that we don't have to work 8 jobs to be I would just like to hang out with Tim all the time. I don't know if he'll ever give up his other 17 jobs, but but even as we look at that stuff and hiring other people down the line that aren't our kids, it's like when you look at stuff like that, it's like, how do you fairly figure that out? Especially if it's something that, I mean, you were reading comics before, but it's suddenly turned into work, right?
I would say the difference, and I mean, I think you feel it too. The difference for me is because a large part of into my job is I do a lot of reviewing and reading. So I used to, when we started this podcast 4 years ago now. Is that where we're at? 4 years ago now?
It'll be 4 in October, I think, something like that.
I was reading 2 to 4 books a week before our first podcast, right? When the podcast physically started, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to up that, and I was going to read 4 books a week, so I always had a nice spread of books to talk about for the podcast. As the store opened, 6 months after that, I started to realize that wasn't enough because people wanted to talk about other books, and so it bumped up to 10 books a week, and then it bumped up to 15 books a week. And as I said, and then all of a sudden you have a week, and it was one of those things I got home last night and just started looking at. I'm like, there are 38 books here to read. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a big jump from the 4. I mean, I used to take an afternoon and read comic books. When we started the podcast, we recorded Wednesday night. So Wednesday morning, I would go out. I would hit the comic book stores.
To the books either. Yeah,
at 11 o'clock, I would buy my books. I would bring my books home. I would read them before 6 o'clock, and then I would come and podcast. And so it was a much different activity level than getting the books read for this show, and then reading the additional books for the top 10, and reading the additional books that I'm just ready for when it comes to end of the year discussions and all of that. So. Yeah,
it's
and not to complain again. I mean, I'm reading comic books. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So
yeah. Oh, I'm not. Yeah. So that's setting up a different thing of like not complaining at all, but just wondering like those questions of like, I think that we across the board want this to be a place where we're treating people extremely ethically and fairly, and like wherever that line is, we want to be even further on it.
Well, luckily, of the three of us read a lot of books. Our employees so far do not.
Well, yeah, as we're hiring our kids, we're hiring people that don't. But like
there's about 30 people right now going, I'd read books if I worked there.
Yeah. But down the line, where we're hiring up people that will like appear on podcasts and stuff like that, that is the question of like, how do you pay someone for how much do you pay someone for something that they would be doing anyways, and like where do you draw those lines? It just gets weird.
Well, then the whole thing is weird. Like, what is it? Do you pay? Is it? Let's say I read at a pace where I'll read when I'm getting ready for this show. I read 3 to 4 books an hour because I like to write a page or two about each one, so I have discussion points to talk about. Whereas if I'm reading the rest of the week, then I might read 8 books an hour because that's about how. I read very quickly, but there are other people who don't read as quickly. How do you
compensate that?
How do you this would be the same with playing video games, right? Like, if I sit down to play a video game, it takes me 4 times longer to get through it now than my 18-year-old son, who's kind of at that more peak video game leveling, which is interesting. I always thought, you don't lose that when you get old. But you start to lose that when you get old. Well, sometimes just my ability to sit in front of the motion, and I'm like, ooh, getting a little nauseous after a couple hours. Time to turn off the video game and sit in a dark room for an hour. Well, they're
starting to figure that out with esports. It's got, you would think with esports becoming more and more a thing, and if you're new to that phrase, it's like competitive video gaming. And you would think with that stuff that like, oh, it's going to be much better than like basketball players or stuff where they're pretty much their career's over at 30 something, or NFL, I think it's even worse than that. It's going to be something where it's esports. You can play that forever, and they're churning through. They're like, they hit 21 and they're like, nope, you're gone. You no longer have the reaction skills to do this. It's kind of crazy how much you lose. Just
it's crazy. I think it's not even. There's a point where you lose stuff, but there's also a point where just the game making changes towards something, I guess, younger that you haven't built up, and so the next generation is already building that up as they start into games. Yeah. Like I play a lot on the Switch because you have kind of basically, you have the Nintendo emulator on there that's got a bunch of games, and the Super Nintendo emulator on there that's got a bunch of games, and you pay $3.99 a month, and you get to play.
You get all that stuff.
There's probably like 150 games on there all together, and I still get on those games and destroy my children. Right, like in a game of ice hockey, no one manages to keep up with me. I play to get techno baseball, and I'm like, I just beat you 22-2. Like, how can you be so bad? But you throw in like a brand new copy of Madden, and I am gonna get my butt handed to me. And so it's almost just that difference in how they're making video games and doing video games.
Yeah, because I think where you killed yourself is you bought into that. It's funny from where you landed now working in a comic book store and stuff, but you spent that period of adult life where you kind of briefly bought into that, like, I'm an adult, I must move past a lot of these things.
It was a very short period because my wife bought me my PlayStation early, but right.
But there's, that whole like 360 PS3 era, I think you did probably the least gaming, like kind of right before that, right into that you've probably ever done, right in that period.
I would say now is probably the least gaming I've ever done.
Okay. Yeah. But that whole thing, like when Halo took over everything, and that basic control scheme, like, which was, I remember at the time, and I was lucky enough just to be young enough to that hit, and I was like, oh man, I hate this. Like, this controls different than every other game, and now every game controls that way.
And now, kids like my son have grown up where that has been.
Oh, my kids do that because Minecraft
since day one. Yeah.
Minecraft controls that way. So like, it's crazy to me. I can stick a controller in my 6-year-old's hand, and she can play Halo because she plays Minecraft. It's like, oh, yeah. And she can move around at Halo better than you can because that's the control scheme she's grown up with.
It was funny. I was talking Andrew, who plays less video games than either of us by a lot. Your daughter the other day was asking him if he knew what Minecraft was, and he was like, I've even played Minecraft. He was like, I like to build castles, though. My kids always, they're like, Dad, why do you just go and build castles? And I was like, that's what I do. So maybe it's an age thing. Like, my kid's like, Dad, you just build a castle, and then you get it really big, and then you move to the point where you can barely see your castle anymore, and you start building another castle. And I was like, well, yeah, what are you supposed to do in Minecraft?
Yeah, that tends to be what I do in Minecraft as well. It's just like I build a really cozy house, usually more than a castle.
My son pops in Minecraft, and if he is not like fighting an Ender Dragon within 8 hours, he's like, well, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, the first 2 hours, he's got like this massive house and gardening system, and everything is self-producing, and I'm just like, what are you doing? I'm still mining stone to build my walls bigger in my castle.
It was great.
In case the zombies come.
So for Father's Day, we all went to a big arcade around here called Pinball Pete's. Went up to Ann Arbor and spent a day at the arcade and did the thing. I split up, kind of got enough quarters for each kid to like kind of go crazy, and it was at the point that my youngest kind of caught up with me from like running around with sisters and everything else. It was that thing of like, she watched me play a pinball game. I think I was playing like the Stranger Things pinball or something. And no, it was the Ghostbusters machine. They have great machines there, by the way. But I was playing the Ghostbusters machine, and I went through and and she's like, wait, where'd the tickets? And I was like, there's no tickets in this one. Like, my kids would only play the games that spit out the tickets for those dumb prizes. And I was like, those games outside of like skee ball and the basketball one, those games all suck. Like, what are you? A couple of them were just straight up gambling. Like, there was one that it was like, all right, hit a button and the ball's gonna spin around and you guess a color that it's gonna land on. I was like, that's roulette. And it was like, if you land on it, it gives you a bunch of tickets. Like, kids, I will go buy you these dumb. Nothing on that wall costs less than $1.
My youngest had a birthday party a couple years at Chuck E. Cheese, and like, it's like 90% that kind of stuff at Chuck E. Cheese now. Yeah. Everything is those weird, like, it looks like a video game, but then you realize you basically pick two things and something spins and then tickets come out.
It's just gambling at that point. And it's worse than gambling. I'd rather they be on slot machines because then they can actually win money. Yeah,
because you get up there, you're like, 10,000 tickets for a pair of plastic sunglasses? Like,
yeah, exactly. But our kids are like, 10,000 tickets, I can get that pair of plastic sunglasses. Yeah. It was insane. And then I just got like slightly bullied by my children because as I'm sitting there playing Miss Pac-Man, it's like, why are you even doing this, Dad? No tickets come out. Game's just dumb. Graphics suck anyways.
I with the Super Nintendo, it was kind of into those games where I used to spend a lot of time. We had an arcade down the street growing up, probably when I was middle school age. And so my buddy and I would save money up for a week or two, and then we would take, handfuls of dollars, turn it into handfuls and handfuls of quarters, and we'd go beat things like Golden Axe or Michael Jackson's Moonwalker or all of those kind of games. And so I'm like playing along on it because we got that Super Nintendo emulator. It's got some of those kind of games on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, this is like the best game. Let's play through it. And like, why would we? This game is dumb, Dad. You can only go in one direction. But these are the best games ever.
These games are amazing. Yeah. So we're gonna take a quick break.
People never give enough credit to Moonwalker.
That is true. We're gonna take a quick break on the audio portion of the podcast. So to let our buddy Randy tell you about some ways you can support the show, and we'll be right back to talk about comic books.
Jeff, I always look for after these messages. We'll be right back.
The video, we're just gonna keep rolling though. We're gonna keep going, Tim. We're doing it live.
We could cut too. We could like edit this video down to like 30-second clips that are really interesting. Which honestly, we used to do our best podcast numbers when we would have 5-minute video clips.
Yes. If you want to start making 5-minute video clips, feel free.
You don't have anything else to do today with me leaving early and Andrew gone?
Yeah, nothing else at all. Yeah. And we're back with this here, the comic book portion.
We were not silent at all. It's going to be tough to find that.
with the comic book portion of the show. It's right at like 36 minutes.
Oh, so I should say, and we're back.
Actually, 35 minutes. Yeah, perfect.
And we're back. And we're back.
My goodness. This here is the portion of the show where we talk about our favorite comic books that came out this week, things we want to highlight, what have you. Tim, what was your pick of the week?
I'm amazed at how calm you sound right there. That was like good, Jeff. I'm impressed with you sometimes.
Okay.
You were just like very calm and subdued.
Emphasis on the sometimes.
Well, sometimes you get a little out there. But Jeff and I read a whole big stack of books every week. We pick out the books that we like the best for a number of different reasons on why we like them the best, and then we talk about them right now. Our favorite book, or the book that we put the highest, is our pick of the week. And this week, and I'm stalling time because I'm trying to find the file where I jotted down my notes. There we go. So every week we pick a pick of the week. This week I went with Black Hammer, Heroes Reborn, #1. I'm going to start out and say I got through 10 books. I loved each and every book I read this week. There will not be any section of the show where I rant about something I hated, because I honestly think this may be, for not having a Tom King book, this is arguably one of the best weeks of comics I've seen in months and months. But yeah, my pick, Black Hammer, Reborn, #1. Jeff Lemire back in the Black Hammer universe, doing his thing. This book, we actually get, I don't know if it's a brand new character. My introduction to the Black Hammer universe is always interesting because I didn't read Black Hammer when it came out.
Have you gone back and read that stuff?
We read some of it. I haven't read everything that's come out. So I didn't read it originally. I jumped in really late. I really enjoyed it. I've picked up some of the stuff in the past, but as we talked about earlier, I don't have a ton of time just to read books that have come out in the past, but I read every new thing that comes out in this universe. I love it. This book kind of picks up after, of course, the team. They end up kind of sent to that parallel dimension or whatever where they're all stuck in the farmhouse. And we have the daughter of the Black Hammer. She picks up the hammer and kind of takes his place. And so this is her story now. And of course, in a very Jeff Lemire fashion, we're not getting all the years that she spent as a superhero, which would have been...
We're taking a time jump.
Fascinating. But yeah, we jump ahead beyond that with he's like, oh, this happened. She picked up the hammer. She became a superhero. She put down the hammer, and now she is a mother of a couple teenagers and, a housewife, and her husband, we find out, is cheating on her, and life is just not going good for this woman.
It's a little messy. Yeah, this is really cool because that picking up the hammer was basically how everything ended. So like you're going into it kind of geared up for like, oh man, I can't wait to see that stuff. And Jeff Lemire's like, no, we're gonna cut forward to the more interesting stuff. But it also gives him and other writers room to play in all of that time period too, which I really like that they can kind of go back in later.
And I hope they do. I think her as the Black Hammer without all of the other superheroes I think it sounds fascinating to read. I would have loved to read that, but I very much enjoyed this and just getting to see it from this perspective. I always say sometimes when you do those characters who are parents and have that type of thing, they immediately become more relatable in a lot of ways because they're dealing with everyday stuff, right? She's got a kid who's getting bullied. Her other kid won't give her the time of day. And just those things that as parents we deal with. And she's trying to traverse all of that and right down to driving the kids to school in the morning and getting them ready. And so she's got all of that. Yet at the same hand, she's got this knowledge that she was the Black Hammer. We get to see in the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but we get to see kind of a glimpse of why she gave it up. And we know that the hammer is still like sitting packed away in a box in her garage. But now the world is starting to fall apart around her, not just her own life, but literally the world falling apart around her. So we're going to see if now this middle-aged mom of two has to pick up the hammer again, which I find to be super intriguing. And the book, of course, anything Jeff Lemire does is really well written, but this is jumping us into a spot in the story that I'm kind of fascinated by and just can't wait for the next issue. If you were to say, what are you most excited about next month? I might say Black Hammer Reborn #2, because I'm all in to see what happens next.
Yeah. It's really cool. I mean, we talk about this a lot. It's weird that the Marvel made its name by being the like superhero story company that went into all that kind of stuff. Like the early days of Spider-Man, the early days of Fantastic Four, like that was what separated them from the competition. Is like, yeah, these are superheroes, but they're facing like real life problems, and that sometimes is way more interesting even than the superhero stuff that's going on. And it's weird how rare that is even today, that any time that happens, we're over the moon about it. If you look at like the Start of Silencer, how excited we were about that book.
Oh yeah, there was the Spider-Woman run, not the current one, but the one before it,
when
she was pregnant.
Yeah.
I thought was fascinating because all of a sudden you're like, what happens when the female superhero is 9 months pregnant but still has to save the world?
The Tom King stuff, Tom King stuff, that's a huge part of like what I really like about the stuff he did in the Batman run, the Vision run, like that kind of stuff. And it shouldn't be that rare, given that it was like how Marvel made a name for itself. It still kind of is. It's really weird. But yeah, no, it's a great pick. I didn't know what to do because it was like I had to either not talk about this or make it the pick. Like those were the two options.
I love it. I always get this like, haha, Tim, he's the guy on the show with the big head. And this is I think Jeff running with an enormous head.
No, I mean
it's okay, Jeff. Pump up that head and go with it.
Okay. No, I'm in this comic book, which
it's cool.
It's cool. I mean, we all are, and it also gives me a platform to talk about Ben and gush on him for a bit, which I'm always happy to do. We buy a lot of indie comics in this shop. We have a lot of people like call us up and be like, "Hey, I'm self-producing this comic. Will you order some?" And we almost always say yes, especially if they put a little bit of hustle in. And the little quiet kid who we threw a pie in his face, before he was ever an intern, he was on one of our shows. We did like a game show where we gave away a year of free Batman, which he didn't win, but Ben ended up with a pie in the face. And I remember when Ben walked in with a pile of Fingerbang #1 and going like, "Hey, I got this comic that I write and my friend draws. Would you guys be interested in carrying it?" I think he only brought me one first, and I was just like, it was just like, this is great. Bring me more. Like, what are you doing? Because, again, we say yes all the time, and quite often it's kind of not the best product in the world. It's often like, oh yeah, no, we'll buy that, we'll support it, we'll throw it out there. It was the first that I was like, holy crap, this is a legit comic book. It looks like a comic. It reads like a comic. It's really funny throughout. And it does have the problems of an indie comic in that we have to sell it for $10 because it's not filled with advertisements from stem to stern, and they're not printing 100,000 copies of it to spread the cost.
That being said, far more rare on that print run.
yes, very much so. But yeah, it's and it has been 6 issues now of actually really quality, really funny stuff, which we don't see on that amateur level. And then Ben, of course, became an intern, and we run it, and it was like it kind of in that weird moment of buying this book, it reminded me of some of my weird nonsense growing up of like making my own comedy CDs and selling them in high school, and it definitely having that amateur edge of it, but also being something better than a 14-year-old should be putting out at the same time too. But yeah, and then he talked about throwing me in the thing, and then Andrew did the Kickstarter and paid for me to be in the thing, and then Ben tried giving the money back, like, I was gonna do that anyways. Like, no, what are you doing? And at the time, 6 was gonna be like my first cameo, and then 7 was gonna be like my actual like first appearance in comic books as Super Jeff. But then when he and his buddy got talking, and has like he's wrapping up his like Adrian College chapter and everything else, and Ben's figuring out kind of what he's doing next with his life. They kind of wanted to wrap this thing up, so this might be the end of this comic too. I would imagine they'll end up revisiting someday, but probably for a while. And so that's where he's like, no, I got to get it all in, and all the Jeff stuff in this issue. It's pretty cool. I wish economics were such that I could sell it cheaper than $10, because I think that's a lot of the holdup. But that's where a lot of indie comics kind of land, is in that $10 mark, because printing things is expensive. It turns out.
But I mean, it's the first Jeff appearance, and Andrew and I make a quick cameo. So
yes.
As we sit next to him, Andrew has a line. I look grumpy.
And I think you're holding a beer, which is very not you.
But it's tough to sell. I've got a mug full of beard, definitely, but
yeah. And I like Baby Harvey's in there too. It's pretty great. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And outside of the sheer vanity of like, holy crap, I'm in this thing, which I was talking about on the live show last night, like pretty surreal. My life continues to be these escalating levels of surreality of just like, well, that's weird. I'm in a comic book now. That's pretty cool. So
it makes me think like Ben just did this, right? Like,
yeah.
So I grew up making comic books, as every kid does. You know,
Yeah.
I drew my own comic books. I wrote my own comic books. I spent a large amount of time in my early adult life where I was writing, not for a living, but I got paid for it, so you could almost say it was like a fifth job.
We both did.
We both did, yeah. I had a number of short stories published. We wrote a novelette, a novella, I guess. You've written a novel.
Yeah.
And so we always sit and talk, like, why don't we write a comic book? You know, and I realize, yes, we have to find someone to do art, because although we both drew our own comics growing up, we're probably not strong enough artistically to keep that up.
Yeah.
That being said, like, he just did it, right? And I'm like, why haven't Jeff and I just done this? Like, why haven't we produced a comic book yet? And yeah, we'd have to sell it for $9.99, but why haven't we done it yet? Yeah. And so maybe that's our 2021 inspiration, is we're going to get this project started, a Jeff and I comic book, and actually have something on the shelf for Christmas.
Is that the goal?
On the shelf for Christmas.
Okay.
Now, we have to find a cheap artist to work with.
Yeah.
So if you guys are listening and know a really cheap artist, what we'd like to do is work out a profit-sharing deal. But if you need money up front, I mean, I got some money in my pocket.
I don't mind paying for art up front. It's just, the expensive part, unfortunately, is not even paying for the art up front, even if you're getting it on the cheap or paying for it. It's the printing. It is the thing that's just like, and that's why you end up having to sell it for $10, because it's just like, there's just no economic.
Well, we can't print books where we come out at our cost being 50-60 cents an issue, right? Like, that does not work.
Yeah. And I've sat looking at those mathematics quite a bit. It's been on the radar for a number of things and projects. But
I think maybe people would pay $99 for a $9.99 for a comic that you and I did.
Yeah. I always thought like it'd be cool. Yeah, especially even though I'm in this comic book, I don't know that you or I are necessarily the best characters from it. I thought RJ deserves like maybe a little comic run here. Or something.
We can do something like that. We got ideas a mile high, man. So
yeah.
All right, so Jeff and I, by Christmas, we're putting that out there. There's at least a 20% chance that we will have a comic on the shelf that you can buy this Christmas.
By Christmas.
By Christmas. I'm giving us a deadline.
Oh my goodness.
That means we got to write a comic in July.
What if we do by the time I'm 35? So that gives us till April.
If we take that long, man, we're going to use it. So if we say by Christmas and then we get it out by the time you're 35, we'll be doing good.
All right.
So
you heard it here first, folks.
All right, we're going to be writing after the show today.
All right.
Anyway, next book I want to talk about, Wonder Woman number 774. I think it's interesting, as I said, between 38 books, I kind of sat down and tried to figure out both the stack of books that I wanted to read the most, plus the stack of books that I thought would be most interesting to the people listening to, for everyone listening, and then wherever those books intersected, I chose, this is perhaps the one that was farther onto what I wanted to read the most, and not as far as what everybody wanted to hear about. But everybody should. Wonder Woman, since moving to this infinite frontier, has honestly been better than I've ever read the book, and I've been reading Wonder Woman for a long time. Tamaki Run was really solid. I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. This stuff has been better. Wow. Wonder Woman in Asgard has been amazing. Yes, she heads back to Mount Olympus in this issue, and you're like, oh, heading back to those Greek gods again. But she gets there and everybody's dead. Like, they've all been killed, and she still has the, like, squirrel that she has from Asgard with the horn, which is all, like, it all kind of fits into all of that legend and everything else as far as it's a real character in mythos as well. As her sidekick now, and she's got to try to figure out what happened, who killed all the gods. It appears like it's the evil version of herself that was created while she was in Asgard. Not quite sure about that yet, but the only clue she has is a Roman deity who's hilarious. I can't remember what he's the god of, but he talks about how everyone kind of forgot about the Roman pantheon, and so they just started to fade away. And he goes, it was even harder because there's no Greek counterpart of me, so the Greek gods felt bad for me and let me come live here, which is just a comical character as you have this, like, pour down on his luck Roman pantheon god. This book is amazing. It's honestly, as I said, I've been reading Wonder Woman probably since we got back into doing this 4 or 5 years ago. And I've read a lot of bad Wonder Woman in that time, and this book right now consistently is in the top 3 or 4 books I read every week, and it's great. If you ever wanted to hop on, 774 is a great hop-on point as well. We kind of start the next arc here, and it's an easy book to jump into.
Good Luck, number 1 came out from Boom this week. This is one of those I'm incredibly interested because the world is so fascinating and so cool and so weird, but it's gonna be like I'm gonna give it a few issues, see where I was way more interested in the world this time than I was in the actual story being told, but part of it is they just barely got into it and this issue ended. But this is all taking place in a world where luck is like very identifiable and quantifiable, and so it's almost like a Gattaca situation where they can tell scientifically who's incredibly lucky and who's not, and we are following like the 4 or 5 characters that are like the least lucky people in the world, so unlucky that they're actually wearing like spacesuits around, kind of things that like insulate them from the environment and is like pumping extra luck into their into their like cells so that like they can basically survive life.
Interesting.
And they're going through like training of like, all right guys, we're gonna like try to get you lost and see if you can get out of it now that you're in these suits. We're gonna try to and basically this is setting up that the whole fate of the world is gonna be left up to these like 5 incredibly unlucky people, which is like just a really cool concept in itself, but we barely got into it and the issue ended. So I love this idea, though. It's one of those you can instantly be like, oh, I could see that being a TV or show or a movie or something. And this stuff, whenever you start playing with luck like this, it gets really dicey. Like the domino stuff, it's either some of the best stuff you've ever read or seen or some of the worst. And so I'm interested to see how they play with that going forward, but I really liked it.
It was one of the few number 1s I grabbed this week and thought, this looks like worth a read. So Heroes Return #1. This is kind of my third of the big picks here I want to talk about. We have the end of the Heroes Reborn saga, jumping back into kind of the Avengers timeline. It's mostly a massive battle between this kind of misfit Marvel Avengers team, as well as then your Squadron Supreme, who's been in this current world. It's basically a fight between the Marvel heroes and the DC heroes, which is a lot of fun to see. And just even... like you find out Hyperion is actually his metal is not kryptonite, but it's vibranium is the metal that takes him down. So as they're fighting in Wakanda, he just keeps getting weaker and weaker and can't figure out why. But yeah, we kind of finish this. We lead up into a world I think that is actually jumping right back into the Avengers run. With a kind of massive change into the world around us, which I think is interesting. The world was set back to how it was. We find that Coulson, who was the president of this world, had made a deal with Mephisto to bring peace to the world, and he did it by creating this perfect superhero team. And so that was all Coulson's fault the whole time. The deal is broken, the world gets returned to how it was, but the heroes don't leave. They're all still in the world, and they hate the Avengers for taking their world away from them.
Well, is there an argument that other world was kind of better?
Yes. A big argument that the other world was better. Because the Avengers, give or take what you think about them, tend to be very flawed heroes, whereas this group of more, you might say, DC-esque heroes were all kind of perfect.
Which is kind of the pitch of DC versus Marvel anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating.
So what Jason Aaron did here is, and so they leave, and the world now is not as good of a place, and they all know that the world is not as good of a place, and they're upset that the world is not as good of a place because they did a better job at what the Avengers do, but to set the world right, they can't do it. So that's all going on, and then we, of course, for all of those people with the love of Mephisto, we're dealing with, at the end, it was Mephisto, of course, who made that, and of course we have the multiverse going on, and Mephisto has now decided to use the multiverse to his advantage.
Like you do.
Like you do. So, Heroes Return, it finishes up Heroes Reborn, and I'm actually really excited to see where Avengers goes. Of course, this was a Jason Aaron book, and the Avengers a Jason Aaron book, so I'm guessing it will continue on with what Jason Aaron wants to do as a fantastic writer. So,
Reptile #2. Did you ever get a chance to read #1?
No, I mean it sold out here in like an hour. So
we should have second print #1s going here soon. This is a brand new Marvel superhero. Hispanic, has the powers to turn into a full ass dinosaur, or just limbs into dinosaur limbs of various things. He's got an amulet that allows him to do that. We get in this issue, they go into like dinosaur world, basically where his power set comes from, which I think is different than Kazar's Savage Lands, and sometimes Marvel's desire to make everything connect makes everything collapse upon itself in silliness, but whatever. So in Dinosaur World, though, he meets the woman who originally kind of made the amulet, that doing all this stuff, and like that amulet has the ability to basically control all dinosaur stuff and all also prehistoric like flora and fauna and all that kind of stuff. When she made it, her evil son tried to like take possession of it, and they were like, yo, the right person to wield this isn't coming around for forever, so you have to hide this in a way that'll be preserved for, millions and millions of years. And so that's how he's ended up with the amulet over time. But it turns out he only has half of the amulet. The bad guy has the other half. So the bad guy can control all the terraforming type stuff, and he can just control all the dinosaur stuff right now. which is really kind of cool. This reads and feels like, you know, like what it is, which is like the first solo book for this character, and it's really setting up this character's mythos. But it's doing it in a very basic 90s superhero kind of way, which seems like it's a bad thing. But given how many times in the last 4 or 5 years we've read first solo books that haven't done that, but instead have been like super weighed down by Marvel continuity of just like, well, and then Doctor Strange shows up and he's your best friend, and like, this is carving out this kid's own space and his own bad guy and his own all this stuff, and it's doing it really, really well. I like this book a lot.
Yeah, I know we recommended that to a couple people who were in the store on Tuesday.
Yeah, so that kid came back just to get it, and I remember you recommended on the like, yo, if you want dinosaurs, this is and they go to Dinosaur World, and there's dinosaur stuff, stem to stern in this, and I was like, I'm so glad this kid got this. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping in here to kind of going through some other stuff I read again. Not that these had anything wrong with them. I loved every book, and a lot of these may have even been a pick of the week in different weeks. Just to tell you how good this week of comics has been. I want to talk about Infinite Frontier. This is, of course, straight from the pages of Dark Knight's Death Metal. Infinite Frontier is what's taking place everywhere, but here we see a Justice Society who's keeping the multiverse in check. At the end of Death Metal, we have, of course, a multiverse being destroyed by Wonder Woman and then being reformed by Wonder Woman, and now we're kind of seeing the after effects of all of that. I don't know how many times we're going to jump back in here, like if we see an Infinite Frontier 2, or if we're going to jump back into this in another stace, but yeah, it's real good. I highly recommend that. I read Wonder Woman Black and Gold. Of course, this is the trend now to do a number of short stories with limited color patterns in the art. This was done significantly better than the Superman Blue and Red, in my opinion.
I feel bad. Andrew rarely gets a call wrong.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare. He is beside himself that he didn't order enough of these in a way that I even today I was like, dude, it's okay. It's really okay. We've got more coming in.
Well, we do. We have more. We've ordered higher on number 2 because I asked him to get me the one in 25. Because it's Mac cover.
Yeah.
So that one is definitely going to be higher than number 1 was, and we'll get more of number 1 as well.
Yeah.
He did. He told me that right away. He goes, I didn't order enough of this, man, because this book is really hot right now. It's really good. The stories are good. The art sticks to that black, white, and yellow color pattern, unlike some of the other ones who are like, we can use other colors some. So I really like that. Checkmate number 1. It's a 6-issue miniseries dealing with the events after the Leviathan fallout. Event Leviathan was an event 2 years ago by Brian Michael Bendis, where Superman kind of revealed who he was, and it was the fallout of that.
A video in which that first issue of that came out popped up in my Facebook memories, and Hunter was in the video in which I was talking about it, and like she looks like a baby.
Yeah.
6 now. She must have been like 3 or 4 at the time.
So I mean, it's really good. You've got all of the detectives from around. You got the guy who's just the Skull, Bones, or whatever you call him, and Lois Lane, and Green Arrow, and the Question, and all this group. My biggest problem with this book is, as I wrote to Andrew, I said, I'm not sure who this is for. Like, this has got to be for somebody who read Event Leviathan and liked Event Leviathan and wanted to find out what happened after Event Leviathan 2 years after Event Leviathan.
Well, I think
it's good.
Well, so the weird thing about what we do is that we read this stuff week to week as it comes out. But the huge and like even more growing piece of the comic book market is the bookstore market, in which this will slot in right after that.
Oh yeah,
on a bookshelf in a way that like people are going to go from one right to the other and not know any of this that we're talking about now.
Yep, but they're probably not listening to this podcast either. So
probably not. No. Yeah.
Blue Flame number 2. This book is interesting because I walked in and saw you reading it, and I thought, I can't believe Jeff is reading this. It feels like a Tom King book. As we have all these different timelines and lots of questions being asked and answers not given. It's not Tom King. It's Cantwell. Yep. It's really well done, though. I'm very much enjoying it as we get this As we get this character, the Blue Flame, he was part of a vigilante group. There's a mass shooting. We get both him being taken to the hospital and his sister finding out he's still alive. At the same hand, we get this future where he's speaking for the human race as far as this like alien group that's trying to decide whether they're going to decimate Earth. I really like it. As I said, I was surprised to see you reading it because it's a very un-Jeff book.
Yeah, no, it is. It is taxing in the ways that Tom King stuff can be taxing. The thing is, I really find the one half of the plot compelling enough that it's pulling me along for now. But it's like I'm waiting for the payoff of how the two are going to connect. And I found myself really pushing and struggling to read the bits that weren't that part more than...
Are you looking for the daughter stuff or the future stuff?
No, the future stuff I really like and find really interesting. So,
Batman Reptilian #1, Garth Ennis. This book, kind of that dark and gritty Garth Ennis book that you would expect a Batman book to be. Beautifully like hand painted panels. Very much liked that. Did you read that?
I did not. No, we
ran
out of copies of it. So,
Old Guard, Tales Through Time, #3 of 6. This had a short story in it by Michael Bendis. There were 2 short stories. Old Guard, of course, is kind of a property that's been around for a little bit now. Neat to see Michael Bendis hop in here. The artistic style is very much like what you might see in some of the Bendis indie stuff, as he took in this kid who considered... the Charlize Theron character from Old Guard, his mother. And so she bumps into him one day, and he's now like 65, and she still hasn't changed. They had last saw each other when he was 6. And so then they sit down and have dinner together. It's kind of a fascinating book, and that was a great story within there by Bendis, just to look into it. And of course, Darth Vader, #13, War of the Bounty Hunter. Last but not least here, because it's another very good book, we get Darth Vader still trying to track down Solo. Some really great internal monologue stuff now, as he is scared of becoming obsolete because he realizes that Luke could be a much better version of himself, which is why he's trying to track down and kill Luke again. Because he realizes, hey, I'm getting old, I'm half machine, I've got all these issues. Basically, Palpatine's not going to need me once Luke's around, so I've got to kill Luke so Palpatine still needs me. You get to see ultimately the fear that drove him to become Vader in the first place is what's keeping him as Vader, and I think that's really kind of profound, jumping into that whole Star Wars mythos.
Last things I will talk about, Something's Killing the Children, #17, continues to be really good origin stuff for that character. Seeing the background of these monster hunters and their initiation practices and all that kind of stuff. Really, really good stuff. And if you've been hearing all the hype, or if you started reading and like kind of were like, oh yeah, it slipped for some reason, and then these books became the most expensive thing ever, you can start at 16, and it's a pretty good jumping on point, because it is just giving you background stuff. It's not even like you're flashing back and forth, but it's like you're just following the character as a little kid. Harley Quinn continues to be, I think, my favorite Harley run ever at this point. The art at this point, I've jumped over to the point where it actually works for me. It took 3 issues, honestly, to get there, but the writing is just phenomenal. And I was talking to someone in the store yesterday about it, and who had given up on reading Harley, and the opinion was just like, man, if I want to read a Deadpool comic, I just read Deadpool, which was kind of the problem with Harley books before. But this is really, really good, and people should be picking it up. And then Robin as well continues to be fantastic. You got like a little twist at the end of this issue that is not bad, but like I think the things that they were setting up in this comic were enough without that. But I could see if you were trying to sell this pitch to be able to actually write it and get the art paid for and get it, you would have to include that bit for whoever whoever runs DC this week to give it a green light. But otherwise, this book is fantastic. I love the idea of just the Mortal Kombat Island, and it's really, really good D&D and stuff. So.
All right. Well, yeah, that's what we read this week, and as we have customers itching to get in here, we better wrap things up. But of course, you can follow Jeff and I over on patreon.com/Rad Raptor. We've got a number of shows we do over there, including a Loki one, which hopefully we'll record today. We'll have to see how the day goes.
That's the hope. And then
we don't have all those additional people here like we usually do on Thursday. So
we don't. It's going to be an interesting day. Also, we do patron-only auctions and stuff like that. If you're already addicted to our Facebook auctions where everything starts at $1, it's even more fun when there's way less people to compete against. So stuff starts going criminally cheap. Also, now that we've had a few more hands around to help things, I've been getting things more active on things like YouTube, on Reddit, on everything. So, get out there, find all our stuff and support us anyway. Even if you can't support us monetarily, every little thing you do helps this ship stay afloat quite a bit.
Yeah, tell a friend about the podcast, pass the word along, go and download this to all of your friends' phones when they're not looking. Anything like that is acceptable. And we'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll be back with the live show as well. But again, if you're listening to this, that doesn't matter to you anyway.
Yeah. Have a good week, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.